Hi guys. Anybody didn't hear my spiel earlier? I'm a master gardener, have been for a long time. There are other master gardeners in the group, and we welcome them because they're going to ask very important questions that is going to test my ability to answer. So that's my hope. I volunteer out of the Rutherford County Master Gardener program here in town, which is magnificent. All the programs that the Rutherford County Master Gardeners undertake are magnificent. And please, welcome, come and do it with us. We have we still are registering for basic gardening out of the office at the Ag Center. That's Rutherford County Extension, UT, TSU, University of Tennessee, Tennessee State University. Number there is 615-898-7710. You can also access their calendar on the web, on the internet, and it's Rutherford County Master Gardeners or Rutherford County UT TSU Extension. So please join us. We have a really good time. Today I'm going to talk about seed starting. I thank you for coming. I thank you for putting up with me. And we're going to do seed starting today because it's time. Seed starting. Calendar for seed starting is available on the internet. I'm not going to mention a single seed source because there's tons of them. But I did see one where you put in the date of your frost date. Frost date in this area this year, because it's not set in stone, is going to be April the 21st. That date is established by data from NOAA, which is National Oceanic and Atmospheric something or other. And they tell you, the frost date is the average frost date in your area. So you can go to one of these sites, put in your date, and then go down a list of seeds, and it will tell you when you should start your seeds according to that frost date. One of those that I saw, and I'm not supposed to prefer one company over another, but I did see one on Johnny's Seeds that looked very good. You just put in your frost date and go down and establish when you should be starting your seeds.
That's April 21st.
No, yes, April 21st this year. It used to be April 16th, which is where a lot of people are going to get confused because they're going to think, oh, it's April 16th. This year, based on current average frost dates, it's April 21st.
But that's not starting.
That's outside. That's your frost date. You'll get 50% of the frost in your area before then, 50% of the frost in your area after that. And so that'll just give you an indication when your plants should be set outside, unless you want to protect them once they are outside. So you can still put them outside, but you're going to have to protect them if there is a frost. And after April 21st, there could be a frost too. It's not written in stone that that's the end of the frost. As we all, as gardeners very well know, that's just your average. That's your best shot. The seed packages that you see in the stores right now and that you see online are a wealth of information. They will tell you on the back, most of them, when you should start your seeds indoors, if that's what you would like. We're going to cover primarily indoor starting seeds as opposed to outdoor starting seeds, because outdoor starting seeds are pretty simple. You just put it in the ground, good to go. You count backwards from the recommended dates of outdoor planting to determine the time of starting seeds. So if I have a seed that takes 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks is a typical time, and it'll say on the back of the seed packet, it'll say days to harvest. I want to start 8 to 10 weeks before that. Germination, first factor is water. Water is critical for the first step in germination. Without water, seeds will remain dormant. The germination starts the seed to know that it's time. It'll soften the coat on the seed. You'll get a production of chemicals inside the seed that says it's time to break dormancy. And but the water will be the first. The amount of water is critical. It should not be sopping wet. It should, just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, just right. Not too wet, not too dry, just right. Too little causes seeds to rot. Too much causes embryos to. Too little causes embryos to die. Too much causes seeds to rot. Adequate continuous moisture is essential to germination. Now, another note on germination. The way to tell if seeds that you have saved at home are viable is you take your seeds that you got at home and you put them in a paper towel and you take a set number, 10, 100, whatever, or an approximate. You put them in a paper towel, you moisten the paper towel, you put the paper towel in a plastic bag, you set it in a warm spot, either on a heat mat or some kind of heat generating source, top of your water heater, and you watch them germinate, give them 8 to 10 days. After those 8 to 10 days, you count the number of seeds that have germinated. And you'll get a percentage when you divide the number that germinated, the number you started with, and that way you'll know that you're going to get 50% germination, 60% germination, I am so sorry, 80% germination, 100% germination, and you'll know whether that seed that you have saved is worthwhile planting. You know, if you only get 20% germination and it's not some exotic plant, you might want to rethink that. You might want to go get new seed. Oxygen in germination. Oxygen is essential for the growth of plants. It's also essential in germination. Viable seeds actively respire. That means they're exchanging gases with their environment, releasing carbon dioxide and consuming oxygen. As germination proceeds, respiration increases and more oxygen is needed. Light in germination. Some seeds require light to germinate. Some seeds don't. It'll just depend. You read your seed packet, and it's a wealth of information. Read your seed packet. It will tell you whether you need light to germinate that seed or not. Some seeds have no preference. Now, if you're using artificial light, once your seeds start growing, you want to keep your artificial light either a shop light or a grow light or some kind of light. Incandescent lights would throw off a lot of heat. I'd be careful of those. You want to keep them 2 to 4 inches above your seeds after they have germinated. This is important. 2 to 4 inches above your seed after they have germinated. Before that seed germinates, you don't need to worry about light at all. But 2 to 4 inches above your seed after it is germinated. The reason for that is when your seed germinates and gets its, first it sends out a root, then it sends out the seed leaves, then it starts moving up. Once it starts moving up, it's going to reach for the light. Whenever your stem reaches for the light, it's like, if the light's too far away, it'll reach and reach and reach. When that happens, this area back here gets weak because it doesn't have, it needs to be a strong, sturdy stem. Damping off, which I'm sure you've all been exposed to, is not caused by just the fungus. The fungus that attacks the stem and causes the plant to undergo damping off is everywhere. You can't eradicate it. You can't create a set of conditions where it's not going to attack that stem. The only way to combat damping off is to create a sturdy stem. The only way to have a sturdy stem, or the first thing in having a sturdy stem, is having adequate light so that seed isn't reaching for that light.
That keeps them from being late.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Now, there's another factor, too. Anybody that hangs out in the springtime outside or any place knows that it's windy. Wind also strengthens your stems. There's a hormone that's in your stem so this sounds a little weird, but when I start seeds, I keep a straw next to them if I'm indoors, and I blow on them as I go by. Because if they're doing this, they're establishing a little bit more strength.
It's like exercise.
Yeah. Temperature and germination. Temperature affects the number of seeds that germinate as well as how fast the seeds germinate. Some seeds have a very specific temperature range for germination, while others will germinate over a broad range of temperatures. Days to emergence, though I very rarely fool with any seed that takes more than, would be inclined to take more than 20 days to germinate. I'm sorry, no. But The optimum temperature is right there in the middle. Now, you can artificially affect the temperature of your seed medium, whatever it might be, by using a heat mat. You can also take the heating pad that you use for your back, wrap it in plastic, and put your seeds on top of that. But usually the optimum temperature for seed germination is around 70 degrees. Now, the temperature, as you increase the temperature, you're going to increase the need for water, so keep that in mind, because more temperature. Initially, when you start your seeds, you can put them in a plastic bag. That way, any water that evaporates up off the medium will collect on the inside of the plastic bag and kind of rain in there. But again, you don't want to keep them in there forever because you don't want mold in your seeds. That will attack them. Containers. These are old deli containers. This is my seed blocking stuff. These aren't very good seed blockings. I didn't mill this, and I didn't filter it to get the bigger pieces out. I'll do that when I get home. But if anybody wants these, they're welcome to it. This is just out of the recycling bin. It's a seed blocking, but I could have just as easily just used the medium and not put it in a seed block, just had it loose like that. But then I would have had to transplant. So you can use any kind of container that can be used for starting seeds as long as it drains, as long as the medium is draining. That you can poke a little hole in the bottom of it if you want. Deep enough for good root development, and it's sanitized prior to use. Typical sanitation would be 5% of bleach added to water. You could either rinse the container or you could spray it with a sprayer. I'm sorry, I will admit to y'all that I have never sterilized anything because I'm lazy. I'm a lazy gardener, okay? and in the group of iris growers, that would be so offensive, but but I'm a lazy gardener. That's why you feel good when you work outside. Did you know that there's mood elevating chemicals in your dirt? No. Yes, absolutely. Yes, sir. You can make your own. Now, newspaper's not that available anymore, but you can make your own little pot. You just take a sheet of paper, not as heavy as this paper, you take a sheet of paper, and you can either roll it around a piece of wood or roll it around a toilet bowl holder and fold it in on the bottom. Tape it or not, fold it in so it holds dirt. Fill it full of dirt, and then put your seed right in there if you would like. When you do this, the only thing you have to be careful of, and I'll say this again when I talk about those other things, whenever you put this whole thing in the soil, I mean, and the paper will break down as long as it's thin. This is kind of heavy. But whenever you plant something like this in the soil, make sure that you rip this part off so that it's below the soil line. Otherwise, the part that's sticking up above the soil line will wick the water away from the plant. It'll be just like a candle wick. It'll be sucking the water right out of the plant. Initially, your seed doesn't need any fertilizer to speak of. A little bit, not a whole lot. And your typical potting soils will have a 10-10-10, 10 nitrogen, 10 phosphorus, 10 potassium. So they don't need that. Now, will it hurt them? Use whatever. You could just add peat moss or coir. Peat moss is hydrophilic. I'm going all over the place here. Peat moss doesn't like water. Until it soaks up a good bit of water, it's hydrophilic. It will resist the penetration of water. So you got to soak it in advance to get it to absorb water. That's why when you buy plants, hanging plants or plants from the store in the spring, and you let them dry out too much, and then you water them, the water shoots right through them. That's because that peat moss has dehydrated and retracted like this. And the only way to get it to rehydrate is take the whole pot and put it in a bucket of water so that you force the water back into that peat moss. But core doesn't operate like that. Core is ground up coconut hulls or bark or whatever they use. So just soak it. Just make sure you don't let it dry out. Once you let it dry out, you're in trouble. A little bit, not a whole lot, but yeah. Newspaper pots, wrapped into a cylinder, folded or taped. Potting soil is placed in the cylinder, seeds grow, and the entire cylinder is placed in the garden. Just remember to rip that little top off so that you don't pull the water away from it. And those really work. Now, peat pots. Same thing. These are peat pots. They'll pull the water away from the roots. They do work. They're just, you don't have to hold them from year to year. You don't have to sterilize them. They're in pretty good shape. So yeah, I mean, whatever works. Filled with starting medium, seeds are transplanted or planted directly into the medium. Entire plants placed into the garden. Plant roots will grow through the wall of the peat pot, and don't let this method dry out. I don't like my roots going through anything, so I tend to either cut it when I put it in the garden. If I use these, like take a knife and just, or if there's a lot of roots in there, I'll see if I can't get it out. It's a great medium to use, but I'll see if I can't get the roots out of there intact. Peat pellets. That's what's in here. This is a little greenhouse kit. It'll maintain your moisture level. Y'all come up here and at the end and take a look at this stuff. Oh, it even comes with little name tags. This is a peat pellet. You soak it, it turns into a blob of peat, and you put your seed down in it. There's no nutrients in here, and it's got a little netting on the outside that expands with it, and then you just put the whole thing in the garden again. Works pretty good. The reason they're moving away from peat and towards core is that peat is supposedly not sustainable. Peat bogs take a long time to grow, and so it's probably a good idea to go to core. Seeds are placed in the tops of the discs, and the whole soaked disc is placed in the garden. There's no nutrition here. So if you leave in these past the point where they get seed leaf, or past the point where they have seed leaves and go to true leaves, you get your root, and you get your seed leaves, 2 little leaves over to the side. Then after that you get true leaves, and that's when the plant really starts undergoing photosynthesis. And if you want to give a weak solution of fertilizer at that point, you can. But I wouldn't do it as long as the seed leaves exist. The seed leaves exist just to provide nutrition to that plant before it gets its true leaves and starts producing its own food. Soil blocking. That's what I got going on up here. These aren't the best soil blocks, but it's a good example. And you all are welcome to take them home if you want. I got lots more peat, lots more compost. The seed germinates in the block, and the whole thing's transplanted in the soil. This is the seed block starting recipe. This is from Gardener's Workshop out of, I think she's in Norfolk, Virginia. Gardener's Workshop, Lisa Ziegler. This is the best recipe for me that I've ever found, but whatever y'all find is up to you. You know, how happy you are with what you find. 16 cups peat moss, 4 cups compost, green sand, rock phosphate powder. I had trouble finding rock phosphate powder. Y'all might have more luck. Green sand is used for micronutrients. There's macronutrients, which is your nitrogen, your potassium, and your phosphorus. Then there's medium nutrients, which is calcium, calcium, boron, and something else. And then there's a whole list of micronutrients that you need, just a little tiny bit. And that's what green sand is for. Watering. Continuous supply of moisture is essential, not too much, not too little, just right. Light requirements, here we go. You can use LED lights, you can use shop lights, you can use grow lights. Place your lights 3 to 4 inches above the seed trays. If you're on a chain, you can raise your lights as your plants get bigger. If you use a shelving unit with multiple trays of plants, like I got a tray here, got a tray here, got a tray here, you have to put shop lights underneath each level. Strong stems. I guess I can't emphasize this enough. Weak stem, which is prone to damping off disease. And there's nothing sadder than coming home and all your little plants are just falling over dead. Wind blowing a small seedling or newly emerged spring plant helps the plant create a stronger stem. Those are seed leaves. That looks like a bean plant or a squash plant, but those are seed leaves. When it looks like that, that's just seed leaves. Each time a plant is pushed by the wind, it releases a hormone called an auxin, which causes the cells on the opposite side of that plant to lengthen. When they lengthen, the plant leans towards the light. You're going to love that the next time you're outside and your plant's leaning towards the light. You're going to think, oh, look, there's auxins at work. You have to maintain humidity. Soil should remain damp but not sopping wet. Seeds should be placed under a cover to maintain humidity until a good number of plants have germinated. These are glass clutches that you can use outside. Doesn't look like there's anything in them, but you can use these outside. I've often wanted to have little cake toppers all out in the garden, but here's a list of vegetable seeds suitable for indoor starting. Broccoli, cabbage, celery, kale, leeks, lettuce, onions. All of those are cold weather plants, so you can start them now. Tomatoes aren't going to be happy until the soil hits 70 degrees, so don't be planting them until after the frost dates or when the soil hits 70 degrees. Now, there's ways to change the soil temperature if you're so inclined. You can use potting soil. It's been someplace that's warmer. You can dig a hole and let the hole warm up, then fill it with soil that has been warmed. You can keep the tomatoes under cover once you plant them, but until the temperature hits 70 degrees, those plants are just going to sit there. They're not going to, any warm weather crop is just going to sit there. Buy and plant what you enjoy. Most people plant too much, so buy and plant what your neighbors like too. Buy seeds suitable for your area. You'll see on your packet that there's seeds that have, you'll see the growing time, the planting times, the zones. And a lot of time, but keep in mind that those seed packets were designed at one place for one seed for the whole country, and Canada, and Mexico, and maybe Iceland, and Greenland. So plant what will grow in your area, no matter, just because the seed store's got the plant available doesn't necessarily mean that you should plant it. The Alberta spruce is from Alberta. Okay, one seed packet should be adequate for a 10 to 30 foot row, depending on, though I have noticed that the seed packets are getting smaller. I mean, they're the same size, but the number of seeds is getting less and less and less. Yeah, about a bucket. So that, we'll cover seed saving in just a second. They're reading the seed package, packed for the date. At the top it says packed for 2015, sell by 12/15. Those seeds are probably good for next year, but you willing to take a chance? It's a lot of work to get them started. It's completely up to you. Size of fruit, indeterminate. This is for an indeterminate tomato plant. Does everybody know what that means? Okay, indeterminate tomato plant. The tomato is a vine. So an indeterminate tomato plant comes up, sets flower, sets fruit, fruit ripens, and then the plant keeps growing. And it goes another 12 inches. Sets flower, sets fruit fruit ripens, plant keeps going, just keeps going until it gets too cold or it runs out of nutrients in the soil. But it just keeps going. A determinate tomato plant comes up, sets flower, sets fruit, done. It's not going to have any more. It's going to have more fruit and more flowers the first time. So if you want to can tomatoes or make tomato sauce or salsa or whatever, or sell them, it might be in your best interest to plant the determinate.
Is that
But
on the tags?
yes, always. It should be. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it should be on the tag when you buy if you buy a plant. So that's how you determine that. I didn't mean to say that. That's how you figure out what you want to buy. So if you're going to eat it, if those tomatoes are for your salad, get an indeterminate. If those tomatoes are for your hamburger, get an indeterminate. You'll have one every week. But if those tomatoes are for canning, get a determinate. Planting dates, zone map. There's your zone map. That is a heat map for early planting. There's also, that's an early planting heat map. There's also a maximum heat map that you can access on the internet that tells you what temperature your plant will be likely to suffer from if it gets too high. There's a cool map, which is this. Plant after this date because it'll be warm enough. There's a warm map on the internet that you can access which tells you that your plant will be likely to not do well over this temperature. Like tomatoes they won't set fruit over 95 degrees. That's because the pollen on the little flowers, which they're supposed to mostly pollinate each other. I mean, they take pollen from other sources too, like bugs and wind and whatnot. But the pollen, when you get above 90 to 95, the pollen gets sticky and it won't fall off onto the rest of the plant, the female part of the plant that I'm having trouble, since I'm a senior citizen, having trouble remember what the name is. Doggone it. But this will cover sun, rain, depth, spacing, harvest. So seed packets, read your seed packets. And hopefully I'll remember what that word is. Process of germination, we've covered it. I'm going to do it again, sorry. Temperature, moisture, air, light conditions must be correct for seeds to germinate. Imbibition is when the seed takes up water and the seed coat swells. The plant can't pop open until the seed coat swells. There's also other factors that are called scarification and stratification. Scarification is when you have a seed that's got a really tough coat, and you take a little nail file and you go and help it. When birds eat seeds, their stomach acids will etch the outside of the seed, and it will help the seed. There are places, this is not that pertinent to this, but I talk too much, so I just go on and on. You can, whenever there's a fire in a field, there are species of cherry that won't germinate unless they are exposed to fire, which is grassland fires and such. So when you have a fire in a field or in a grass area, the next year you see all these little cherry trees popping up because they can't, until that fire scars that coating on that seed, they can't come up. Let's see, I call it scarification. Stratification is when you expose them to cold. A lot of seeds have to be exposed to cold in order to germinate the next year. So keep that in mind if you save seeds and you want to start them next year. You might have to put them in the refrigerator or in the freezer for a certain amount of time. Usually it's around 40 days. There you go. Cold stratification, placing seeds in the refrigerator in a moist bag for the required amount of time. We'll do this backwards. Another technique, scratch the seed coat to enable the seed embryo to emerge. Soak the seeds. If you plant beans or peas, you want to add something called inoculant to the soil, to the medium. You soak the seeds for 24 to 48 hours before you plant them. You add inoculant, which is a bacteria, and it helps the seed roots to fix nitrogen so that they can take it up from the soil. And This is a tough one for me. I don't know about you, but it's impossible for me to thin plants. I can't kill them. I can't so I desperately try to transplant them someplace else. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Good luck, you guys. Good luck. But I'm actually harming, when I pull a plant out of there, I'm actually harming the plant I left behind because I'm pulling those roots out. And they're all twisted up with the other roots. So it's, I don't know. Y'all do what you want. I don't know. Pull from the loose soil if you'd like to try to replant the seedlings. And be sure to plant at the same depth. That seed knows what depth it should be planted at. Plant it at the same depth. That was another thing. Do y'all remember people planting azaleas about 10 years ago, and they left a root ball up about this much out of the soil? Does anybody else remember that? I was working at a bed and breakfast, and they had a ton of azaleas, and they're all sticking up out of the soil this much, and I'm like, that's just wrong. But for a while, that was the wisdom of planting the azalea, was you leave the root. They didn't want them to get too wet, so they lifted them up. And that's just wrong. That's just wrong. Hardening off. When you plant seeds indoors and you've controlled their conditions, you gradually want to expose them to outside conditions so that they'll survive. You can't take something in a nice garage with no wind and controlled water amounts and then stick them outside in the full sun and say, okay, go. No. You want to harden them off. You want to take them out and either put them in the shade or put them in on a cloudy day someplace and let cooler temperatures, not drastically cooler temperatures, gradually you want to expose them to the conditions that they're going to be exposed to when they're outside. And then over time, when they're looking good, then you take them out and put them outside. That's another thing. When you transplant plants, either bedding plants or whatever other kind of plants or plants that you have started, plant them. The best time to plant them is when it's not sunny, like either just before nightfall or on a cloudy day, because it's pretty hard on them pulling them out of their little pot and putting them in the soil. So give them a break, plant them when the sun's not beating down on them if you can. Shady, sheltered outdoor spot, increasing lengths of time over a period of 7 to 14 days, and plant outside when not sunny. Seed storage. Open pollinated seed can be saved. That would be flower seeds like zinnia or bean seeds. Bean seeds, you're likely, unless you have somebody else's garden next door, you're likely to be pretty true to the parent plant. But when you're planting flower seeds, you'll get insects from far away that are pollinating, so you're not going to get a true seed. So if you plant this beautiful zinnia that's all red or all this big, and you collect those seeds, next year you're going to get a whole bunch of different zinnias. You're going to get some red, some not. You're going to get little ones, you're going to get big ones, because the pollen that fertilized that plant isn't necessarily coming from the flower next door. It's coming from your neighbor's flower down the street, and they didn't charge you for it, which is really good. But you can save open pollinated plants seed. Humidity should be kept between 35 to 40%, and temperature should be between 35 to 40. I have never kept my seeds in the refrigerator, but some people do, and some people keep them in the freezer. But it's hard to control the humidity when you're doing that. I put them in a plastic bag, put them on the shelf, go back in the spring and get them, and usually the mice have eaten a hole in the bag and consumed a good bit of them. Mice love poppy seeds. Each seed is different in its requirements. So if you're saving a particular seed, you want to look it up and see. Hybrid seed. Hybrid seed is when the person that cultivated that or the company that cultivated that looked for very specific traits. So if you plant corn, chances are you're not going to get anywhere near the parent plant if you plant the seed corn for the next year, because that's a complete hybrid. Hybrid corn is hybrid. Unless you plant Indian corn, that's a complete hybrid crop. And usually it's a corn. Most corn is GMO too, which is that's fine. I mean, GMO just means they genetically inserted a resistance to herbicides, so they can put more herbicides on the crop, and it'll be less intensive cultivation. Hybrid seed mostly developed after World War II. Controlled population between two or more closely related but genetically distinct parental inbred lines. Corn, the tassel is where your pollen is, and the cob is where your seed is. Corn is wind pollinated. Usually you'll see blocks of corn. Don't plant corn in a row and expect it to be pollinated and get it in your home gardens. If you plant corn in a row, not a block, like 5 rows, 5 by 5 or 10 by 10, you're going to have trouble pollinating it. You'll have to do it by hand, which is possible, but keep that in mind. Corn is wind pollinated unless you do it. To maintain the hybrid, a plant breeder must manually cross the inbred lines each year, which is expensive and time consuming. Of the two types, hybrid seed is the most common in commerce, because when they're harvesting that, they don't want to plant this tall and a plant this tall. It's not going to work. So they want uniformity in order for good harvesting and production. Open pollinating and seed saving. Open pollinated plants are either self-pollinated or open pollinated. Boy, that's redundant. If the parent plants are hybrid, the seeds from seed starting may not be exactly like their parent plants. Tomatoes are tough. Go ahead. Flower seeds are much easier. Tomatoes are one of the tough ones. They take, you'll need to look that up before you do it, because it takes a certain amount of fermentation of the seed to break the seed coat before you save it, before you dry it for next year. I can remember my grandfather smearing them out on a piece of newspaper and letting them sit in their own juices for a little bit. There's some, and I've heard it explained. I heard a woman explain it wonderfully from Southern Seed Exposure in Virginia. But there's some. It's like a fermentation process for the seed coat. And don't hold me to that. She was very smart, and I am not. Here's a chart. Small chart of when to start seeds. Before you set it out, cold weather crops started 6 to 8 weeks before the frost date. April 21st, that would put you the first or second week of March. And warm weather crops 6 to 8 weeks before the date on the seed packet to be put out in the garden. Now, I included the reference to Johnny's Selected Seeds. As a volunteer for the UT-TSU, I'm not allowed to recommend one company over another. So I noticed there were lots of different seed starting charts. That's just the one I happened to hit on. Please, I'm not giving preference. And here's my reference. Questions? I know it didn't look like a lot of information when I was putting it together, but when I was talking about it, it looks like quite a bit. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I mean, I am very grateful. Thank you.